Hello, welcome to Gardener's World, and welcome to a special Gardener's World. Today's is the first of 3 programs in which we celebrate the seasons right throughout the year in all their colour, glory and moods. Now, coming up on today's programme, Joe visits a city garden where the design is inspired by one of the world's great natural wonders.
How do you take inspiration from the vast Grand Canyon and bring it here to a garden that's about 9 by 6 metres?
We formed a pathway which is this poured concrete path, and that snakes round very much like a river.
Sisters Rebecca, Kirsty and Mandy enjoy their autumn harvest.
Oh wow, look at that.
Corn and cob.
Look, Becky, look at that. Tell you what, we've got a whole meal here, look.
Yay!
And we follow a Somerset garden as it transforms from one glorious peak in June to another in September.
It's about texture, colour, different character areas, but it also has to work over time. It has to work through the seasons, from day to day, through the year.
The grass borders can be the best thing in the garden in autumn and actually well into winter. They assume all these lovely metallic colours, bronzes and golds and silvers and brass colours. But every now and then I get in here and think, goodness, I need to do a bit of propping, a little bit of weeding and a bit of sorting out so that I can enjoy the fabulous autumn colour to the full extent. Now, earlier this year, Adam went to Cambridge Botanic Gardens, where they have one of the biggest, the best, and certainly the earliest garden devoted entirely to winter display.
Back in the 1970s here at the Botanic Garden, the bosses came up with a radical idea. They wanted to create a winter garden, which back then really wouldn't have been heard of. So once they've finished with all their designing, it was the under gardeners that did most of the planting. And would you believe, over 40 years on, one of those gardeners is still here looking after it. Pete Curley arrived in 1976 to do just a 1-year apprenticeship. So Pete, how old were you when you first came here?
I was 16 years old, Adam, when I started here at the Botanic Garden.
Wow, and how long have you been here?
Nearly 45 years.
What made you stay?
I just loved the garden. There's a lovely atmosphere, lovely staff. When I came to the garden, the winter garden was just beginning to be developed. The layout had started, the undulations in the garden had been made and the hedges had been planted.
If I think back to then, creating an informal winter garden would have been a bit out there, wouldn't it?
It was certainly way ahead of its time. It was an informal landscape. The plants were put in big, bold drifts.
Yeah.
And it really did capture everyone's imagination.
So in a way, was it set out on paper, or how did you sort of all go
No,
about
the
it?
credit goes to the garden supervisor, my supervisor, Norman Villis. He got everything in his head. Very much of the old school of using bamboo canes. I want a big drift of plants here. I want these trees here. That's how the garden was laid out. And still today, I try to do things from the mind's eye rather than trying to draw out plans on paper.
So Pete, I like to ask every single gardener this. In this space, your favourite plant?
Yeah, my favourite plant, you're standing right next to it, Adam. It's this lovely Daphne. Daphne Ballure Jacqueline Postil. It's been flowering since late December. And this is a purposeful planting of either side of the path, so you walk through a wall of scent as you enter the garden.
Pete has been adding to the planting and the garden throughout the last 45 years. But some of the original plants are still in their prime. So Pete, you actually planted this?
That's right, yes, in 1982.
And how big was it then?
It was probably not as high as me. So it's called the paper bark maple because of this lovely peeling bark.
Would this drive the planting you put around it?
Yeah, that's right. So the Cornus sanguinea midwinter fire, which you see behind, is a subsequent planting. But I saw that there was a nice connection between the peeling bark of the Acer and the colour of the midwinter fire stems. Likewise, behind you, Adam, we've got the Japanese wineberry, Rubus phoenicolaceus, which, again, it backlights superbly. It's covered in tiny little red thorns, which, when the light comes through, they all light up.
This time of year is beautiful, arching structure.
It works very well.
As word spread about this groundbreaking design, other gardens were inspired to have a go. But it wasn't just about the planting. It was how this plot worked with the low winter sun. If you imagine they sculpted a flat piece of land, so the banking on this side sits slightly higher than the banking on this side. And behind me, the sun rises and then sets over the far side there. And that means all the planting on this side gets backlit and really brings it alive. Where this side, it gets picked out as if it's being spotlit. And for me, as a designer, the moment that we understand the light in our gardens, the way it moves through the day, we get so much more out of our planting. Pete was talking earlier about where we put scent in our gardens to get the most out of it. But also things like this. This is Prunus cerula, and straight away I'm drawn in to touch it. It's tactile. I think when we're planning our gardens and placing plants, if there's anything tactile, putting it somewhere where you can enjoy it that little bit more is a good idea. Pete reckons he's updated about 60% of the planting as new varieties arrive. And his latest additions are from New Zealand. Formium Yellow Wave brings bold evergreen structure as it meanders through the borders. Libertia adds a real touch of drama with its bright orange foliage. And Muhlenbeckia Estonii looks amazing with its bronze zigzag stems, and even more astonishing after a rain shower. But if there was one thing that's jumped out at me today, it's got to be the pruning. This here is Lonicera papucii, which has got a fantastic winter scent. But if I'm honest, during the rest of the season can look slightly blob-like. But no, they've lifted the canopy so you can underplant. It becomes a completely different creature. I think sometimes, we pick up a book and it tells us something's going to get to a certain size, grow a certain way, and then we think maybe we can't have it in our own garden. But with a little bit of clever pruning, it's amazing what you could put in your own back garden. It's so rare to see a garden of this structure with a gardener who's grown with it from the start, who's still adding more ideas and more creativity. And added to that, we did some research about Pete, and a few years ago he was given an award by the RHS for his services to the industry. He's not mentioned that to me, and I think that is incredibly humble. And I think every time I see one of these Daphnes, that man will get a thought. Wonderful.
I went to Cambridge at the same time as Pete in 1976, and I visited the Botanic Gardens and saw the beginnings of the winter gardens then. So to see that maturity nearly half a century later is quite something. A winter job that I shall be doing is pruning this peony. This is a tree peony, Peony lutea, with yellow flowers. And I'm often asked the right way to prune a tree peony. And the answer is to get right down in there. Now, if I lift this up and pull it back, you should be able to see these new green shoots and then the older growth, the brown growth there. And the way to prune it is to cut out the old growth right down to the ground. However, don't remove more than a third at any one time. And the best time to do that is after the last leaf has fallen, which should be sometime round about the end of November. Now, I love peonies, but I'm no expert. However, I know someone who is, and that is Claire Austin at her nursery not so very far from here.
Peonies, from my point of view, are the most romantic of all perennial flowers. They're big, blousy blooms. They are fragrant, they're great for cutting. They are, at this time of year, my favourite plants, simply because they are so beautiful. My name's Claire Austin. I've been in horticulture since 1983, and in all that time, my peonies have been a feature of my collection. Although peonies can be big, blousy and full petals, these are the peonies that most people think about. There are a group of peonies that are really simply shaped with single flowers, and they were the original peonies that people grew. This is a single peony, a species peony called Peregrina Otto Friebel, which would have been grown in gardens hundreds of years ago, brought over from an area where it naturally grew, from Greece through to Turkey. At the other extreme are the big, full-petalled double peonies raised by French nurserymen from the beginning of the 19th century. By the time they got to the end of the 19th century, peonies like Peony Madame Collot epitomised the perfection of the flower, nicely domed with a lovely rim of what we call guard petals around the outside and a wonderful fragrance. But whatever type of peony you like, all peony flowers can be divided into 4 different styles. So the most simply shaped ones are the single ones, like this one, Peony Pink Princess, which has 1 or 2 rows of large petals, and you can still see the stamens. The second type are the semi-double, which have even more petals, but you can still see the stamens. When you get to the third type, the doubles, the stamens have totally been engulfed by all these petals. And this is top brass. It's full of petals, different colours. You've got yellow ones, white ones, pink ones, and also an outer ring of guard petals. Finally, my favourite style of peony is the Japanese type. This is Jan van Leeuwen, a Japanese peony. Absolutely lovely. The outer guard petals and an inner dome of modified stamens, and at night the young flowers just simply close up and then they open again in the morning. Jan van Leeuwen carries all its flowers at the same level. It's pristine white, a perfect garden plant. If you were to go and buy a peony from a garden centre, for instance, you'll most likely buy a herbaceous peony. These are the peonies that die right back in the autumn and then they start growing again in spring. We split them into 2 different types. So you've got firstly the early flowering hybrid peony, which can come out into flower in April, and they go right to beginning of June. You get them in lovely vibrant colours, vibrant pink, pale yellows, clair de lune. The second section are the June flowering lactiflora peonies, which most people will know, which will include the big double full petalled pale pink called Sarah Bernhardt, and one of my favourites in this garden is a powder puff of white petals, a peony called Shirley Temple. The average height of herbaceous peony is around 90 centimetres. If you have a garden where you can have something a bit higher, just as dramatic, flower a little earlier than the herbaceous tree peonies are absolutely beautiful. The colours are phenomenal. This one is Peony hesperis and it has fantastic flowers. And if you look at the base of the peony, you'll see the woody stems, which create a lot of structure for winter display. In recent years, a third type of peony has become more available. The intersectional peony combines the best of the two different types of peonies, herbaceous and tree or woody peonies. They flower from late May and they will go on, some of them, until quite late in June because they have an awful lot of flower buds. They're really easy to grow, just as easy as a herbaceous, and the beauty of almost all of them is you don't need to stake them. Most of them are quite short and perfect for gardens that have less space. This is Peony Unique and it's covered with flowers and the leaves are beautiful, glossy and disease-free, and it stays upright. This lovely mounding focus plant. Since I took over the peony collection from my father, who had to start from scratch to put it together, I've added more and more peonies. So each year I find a new one I haven't got, so I grow it on and see what it looks like, photograph it, describe it. And I just only hope that one day someone else can take the collection over and just continue forever.
The kind of knowledge and expertise that nursery people like Claire have is something we should never take for granted. It's a very, very precious resource. Now, there is not a single plant here at Longmeadow that I don't like, and very few that I don't love. But there are some that have more meaning than others. And this is one of them. It's nothing rare. It's an ordinary oak, Quercus robur. But it was given to me 25 years ago by a friend when it was just a little sapling. And I planted it and I've watched it grow ever since. And every single time I pass by it, I think of him. And if you can plant something in your garden that is more than just an object of beauty, but has real human meaning, then the whole garden benefits. And we're paying a visit to one of your gardens that is based entirely upon that human connection.
Good morning, my name's David Quinton, I live in Derby. I've only recently got into gardening. I retired early and my idea of gardening before was just helping my beloved grandmother who died many years ago. This hydrangea over there is the last flower that she gave me, about 30 years of age. It's been left to do its own things. The only thing I do is take off the heads once a year, and it's flourished into a most beautiful looking plant. It reminds me of my grandmother every day I look out at it. One of the other things I like in a garden with the Caribbean background is this Seti banana plant here. Last year I had a couple more, but decided to take them out, put them in the garage for the winter. But unfortunately they never recovered. So this year I'm going to protect them properly, put them back, cover them in fleece and straw, and hopefully we'll do really well. This is actually one of my other favourite plants, my Japanese Musa Bijou banana plant. So I've decided to try growing it in a pot, and the plan is to take it indoors in winter. I'm amazed how well it seems to be growing in the pot. Really happy with it. Thank you for visiting my garden, and I hope this has inspired you to take up gardening, because certainly I had no idea before, but with the help of my neighbours, we're really beginning to get to understand it and really enjoy it.
I grow Insetti, and I'll be very interested, David, to see how your Insetti fares outside in winter in Derby. Let us know. This is one of my favourite winter vegetables. It's curly endive. It's a chicory and grows a lot of green leaves which feed the roots, but those are very bitter indeed. So you blanch it by tying it up, then strip away the extra green leaves and they can go on the compost heap, and what you're left with are these lovely, very, very pale green, almost yellow, blanched stems and leaves in the middle that are absolutely delicious. They have a touch of bitterness, which balances out the sweetness and gives it depth and complexity, and is one of my favourite winter vegetables. It's very hardy. It doesn't like it if it's too wet, so sometimes you have to cloche them just to keep them dry, but the cold isn't a problem. So if you haven't grown them, next year, give them a go. They're lovely. Now, we've paid a number of visits to three sisters gardening in Poole in Dorset. And they now share with us the highlights and a few of the tribulations of their past gardening year.
Hi, my name's Mandy.
My name's Rebecca. My name is Kirsty. I am head gardener.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
After our success as first-time gardeners last year, this year we had a very different mission and challenge. We'd given our only veg plot to our growing tortoises, so our friend Paul made us some planters.
Come and see what Paul's done.
This is a fantastic Paul. Thank you.
One had herbs and flowers, the other veg, marigolds and strawberries.
We get enough, we can make some strawberry jam,
Oh
can't we?
yeah, for toast for my breakfast.
Oh, nice.
We had sweet corn and other veg in pots, and our head gardener was very excited.
My name is Dom Jr.
She set to with sheer devotion.
I water my plants every day. The strawberries is growing, like big strawberries.
Where?
It's about here. I can water it and make it grow.
We suspect that the hosepipe enthusiasm led to an early case of overwatering. And we definitely learned about putting plants in the right place. But then an army of unwelcome visitors arrived and brought havoc.
I got bad news. The marigold is gone.
Where have the marigolds gone?
Right there.
Yeah, but where have they gone? Who had them?
It's nails and slugs had it.
So we've got 2 new holes now, haven't we, to plant something else?
Yeah.
In that spirit of optimism, Kirsty kept going, watering less but feeding regularly, including the new tiered lettuce holder for our tortoises. All her hard work paid off in time for a special occasion.
Today, I'm making radish or a salad bowl.
We're going to harvest the radish because it's somebody's birthday and we're having a barbecue, aren't we?
Yep.
So we pull one out?
Yeah. That is a radish. Well, a bit dinky.
We even managed spring onions.
This is a harvest.
And what have you got in there today?
I got spring onions and got radish.
Yay, well done, Kirsty.
What there?
You are the best gardener.
Yeah, I am.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Strawberries ripened nicely and Kirsty learned all about deadheading from Monty, which kept her and her flowers very happy.
I love gardens. I like fresh air, like seeds.
And isn't it amazing when the seeds grow?
Seeds will grow. They put out to earth and grow and grow and grow.
The flowers in the planters and pots grew beautifully. The beans were thin on the ground but made several meals. And they were overshadowed by billowing aubergines, first time ever red peppers, and our favourites, chilies. But the sweet corn, despite their small size, produced the biggest delight.
Come on, baby. Ready?
Oh, wow, look at that.
Corn and cob.
Look, Becky, look at that. Tell you what, we've got a whole meal here, look.
Yes.
Isn't it funny how some are really small and some are really big?
Oh, yes, it is. It's amazing. Sweet corn.
I think we'll have those for tea tonight.
Yay! It's cute, little sweet corn, isn't it, Beck? It's so cute.
So when the planters started looking a bit tired, we decided to recycle them into borders and plant up a whole new display. Though some bulbs were viewed with suspicion.
Oh, God.
On here.
It is a snail. Isn't it like snail to you?
And our beloved planters got an autumn makeover.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Smell that, Kirsty.
Smell of purpley.
It does smell purpley. And it's going to be where we can sit out in the garden and just relax, can't we?
Yep,
With all these gorgeous-
it's champagne. It goes celebrate.
A glass of champagne. Oh, yeah, you're speaking my language.
There's echinacea and grasses, with penstemons, asters,
All right, you want me to do this and you're going to smooth now, okay?
and little violas tucked in between.
Smoothing.
We even had enough for some pots, and it all looked glorious. It's been a challenging year, but the garden continues to lift our hearts.
Lots of fresh air and our little bit of paradise.
Yeah, little paradise.
Well done,
Yeah.
head gardener.
Well done, my assistant. Your best sister.
Oh, you're the best sister too.
Well, Kirsty, Becky and Mandy, I think your garden is an absolute triumph. And thank you very much for sharing it with us. Still to come on today's programme, we discover how a garden designer achieved not one, but two glorious peaks in her Somerset garden.
Everything is billowing and romantic and colourful. And then later it'll all change. And I think it's that process of change in a garden that is such fun.
Kate Bradbury shows us that winter plants are great for wildlife.
It's been discovered that ivy berries, gram for gram, have more calories than a chocolate bar. They're a fantastic resource for birds at the end of winter.
But first, Nick extols the virtues of evergreens when the days are short and the flowers are few.
Evergreens are the key building blocks of a winter garden. Holding their own while flowery counterparts fade away or lose their leaves, they bring structure, texture, and a range of foliage colours to any winter garden. Small evergreens, like these clipped box balls, provide form and focal points in summer and winter, but sing even louder with sprinklings of frost and snow. Pruning in May and September encourages bushy growth and close texture, keeping the shape really sharp. Smaller conifers can bring shape and real colour, like this Pinus contorta Chief Joseph. It's slow growing, naturally conical, almost fluorescent yellow in winter and spring, stepping back to a calmer shade for summer. Underplanting with white hellebores and heathers really sets off these limey tones. And this is a canny idea. These upright sleepers are climbing posts for ivies, like this Hedera sulphur heart. Ivies are easy to grow, there's lots of them, and cut back each spring. They make a tidy green leafy pillar all year round. Many bamboos are evergreen and provide great backdrops as well as lovely stems. While small evergreens like euphorbia light up the darkest corner. But one of the key jobs of any dark evergreen plant is as a backdrop. They're a crucial foil to set off those coloured stems, barks, and flowers. So embrace an evergreen and watch your winter garden flourish.
I think we tend to take evergreen plants for granted, but they're fairly recent developments. After all, greenhouses were developed to protect evergreens because they were so rare and had to be imported by and large. But here at Longmeadow, the Jewel Garden is absolutely based on colour. And it's the last part of the garden to get going in spring. It remains fairly bare until April, and then the tulips kick in. And they're followed by the allium's purple sensation. That, in turn, is replaced by tender plants, cosmos, canna, dahlia, salvias, and these jewel-like colours last deep into autumn. The management of our gardens to get the continuity and flow of colour and form right through the year is one of the great horticultural skills. So we paid a couple of visits to a garden in Backham in Somerset. It belongs to a garden designer who has perfected the art of maximising display right through the seasons.
Being a gardener is a bit like a conductor. You're orchestrating so many different elements. What's difficult and what's interesting is that you're being a 3D designer in both form, shape, colour, texture, and of course time, because you're playing with the seasons. And not only playing with the seasons, you're playing with how plants, trees, shrubs develop over time. I think it's the most difficult art form there is. Hi, I'm Debbie Russell. I'm a garden designer. I've been working on this garden for over 20 years. This garden's a contemporary version of perhaps an English country garden. It's about texture, colour, different character areas, and hopefully it always retains its essence of being a Somerset garden. Well, here we are in this wonderful high moment of summer, the first flush when the gardens are all at their first peak, if you like. Epitomised rather by, I think, this Rosamundi, which flowers once, flowers incredibly beautifully. It moves through the spectrum from these very small buds to this exuberant flower, and then it's gone. And I think that's how I see a garden at this moment, where everything is billowing and romantic and colourful. And then later it'll all change, and I think it's that process of change in a garden that is such fun. The long herbaceous border is at its most romantic now, in late June with the roses to the fore, giving it a quintessential English summer garden feel. But in the border next door, I've gone for something more contemporary. These are our yew borders. And the point about the yew borders is that they are very structural. So all year round, you get this interesting pyramid shape. But the other point about them is that if you're going to do this slightly ephemeral, rather light, pointillist type planting, a bit more contemporary planting, it's very good to have something solid, which is the contrast between the airiness. At this time of year, what we've got is this sort of first flush of high summer again. We've got all these shots of different pinks, oranges, the ladybird poppies, verticals such as this Phlomis Amazon, the eryngiums. So this is a sort of more modern, shocking, colourful type of planting. To ensure I retain height, texture, colour and drama in the yew border for the weeks ahead, I need to add for autumn interest. It's all about planning ahead, building towards a second flush, which, when it comes, is less romantic but looser and wilder. The dramatic eryngium seed heads are now paired with verbena, while bronze fennel stands proud. Lowered iron asters add touches of stronger colour. The herbaceous border in early autumn sees a deeper, richer colour palette emerge as the roses recede, replaced by hydrangeas, and autumn pollinators buzz around the sedums in the warm autumn light. Back in June, another area coming to its first peak of the year is the veg garden. I think vegetable gardens can be actually some of the most beautiful gardens that anybody can have. And what I love is the way that they change so much, and you can play with those changes, you can play with patterns, you can change things all the time. The trick I find is to mix up the produce with ornamentals in such a way that there's always something to eat or pick for cut flowers. Elsewhere, borage and poppies enjoy their moment, while combinations like sweet peas and Cephalaria gigantea are in their late June pomp. It's a special time, but there's plenty waiting in the wings to take centre stage as autumn begins. With sunflowers arching above and the French marigolds popping, now the vegetables assume their rightful place. A rich harvest of gourds and brassicas are coming through, whilst those exotic dahlias look on. This garden is situated in a valley, and actually we're very, very lucky. We have a wonderful wildflower meadows here, and I love wildflowers. We use them very much as a design element in this garden, so as you go up it gets wilder and more naturalistic. Nearer to the house, in an area called the Plat, I try to incorporate the flavour of wildflowers in a more structured way. But bringing it close to the house, it's a little bit like putting it under a microscope. And I use the device of the frame with the cut grass to emphasise the wildflowers and the grass. And I think it works well. And what we do here is use only native wildflowers. So at the moment, you've got the oxeye daisies. I do throw in some alliums. But later in the year, you'll see here this rather blocky leaf is something called devil's bit scabious. It has these lovely little blue baubles, which will be this high and floating and ephemeral. Under my eye, which is just by the kitchen, I can put the kettle on, look at the wildflowers, framed, and actually they're as beautiful as any other garden plant. Come September, I still have plenty to admire as I fill up that kettle. Gone are the daisies, but the naturalistic wildflower atmosphere remains. The subtle blues of the devil's bit scabious now drawing the eye, and more importantly, retaining the height. Like everywhere else, as the seasons change, I've tried to ensure that the Plat is a garden which keeps on giving. The alchemy is to design a garden that works in 3D, it works in colour, it works in texture, but it also has to work over time. It has to work through the seasons, from day to day, through the year. And it's not easy to do, but when it works, it's the greatest joy.
I do agree that keeping a garden looking really good all the year round is the great skill. And it's really difficult, and I think really good fun. Now, one of the ways I keep plants going over winter is to take cuttings, because some plants, like penstemons, don't like our wet winters and heavy soil. I took these cuttings of penstemon garnet about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's quite early days, so I will see if they have rooted. Yes, they have. There's always a note of relief. And you can see what we have here, if I break that open, is a nice root system on that cutting. I will now pot this on into a peat-free compost, keep this in a cold frame, and then this is ready to plant out as a young plant next spring. So even if I lose the parent plant, I know I'm going to have that good display next summer and autumn. Now it's time to visit the second of your gardens, and a gardener who, like me, takes real pleasure in cuttings.
Hi, Gamers World viewers. I'm Darren and this is my garden here in Bradford. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that I enjoy very much while gardening, and that's propagation, especially from cuttings. The ones that I mainly do are willows and dogwood because they're the easiest. When I do pruning of existing plants, if I know that I could get a cutting from it, I feel almost like a moral obligation to take a cutting, I feel guilty if I don't, knowing that I could give that branch a new life. I stuck some in a vase that I was just going to keep in the house, like cut flowers, and to prolong them I put a little bit of water in the vase. And as you can see, a lot of them have rooted, so I'm going to pot some of them up today. What I've done is I've made some gritty compost, which is about 50% compost and 50% gravel. I'll pick a pot. Don't compact the soil as to not to damage the new roots, and just give it a bit of a shake. And I'll stick it in one of these saucers and give it a water. But that's it. Thank you very much and humouring me and let me show you my garden. Stay safe and goodbye.
I do hope that anybody who feels intimidated by taking cuttings takes courage from Damien, because it's not difficult and it's so rewarding. Now, the wildlife garden has always had the brief of looking attractive as a garden, but above all being attractive to wildlife. And I confess that this time of year, it's probably better for wildlife than people. But I deliberately don't do a lot of things at this stage of the year, because what you don't do is as important as what you do when it comes to attracting wildlife. So I haven't cleared out the pond. I have let the rushes and the irises grow rampant because it's great cover. And the borders look pretty ramshackle because, again, that's wonderful cover for small mammals, hedgehogs, shrews, little field mice. And then hopefully we'll have the toads and the frogs and maybe a grass snake, all using the water and the cover around it. Now, Kate Bradbury is someone who has managed with great skill to create an attractive garden that is also very, very good for all kinds of wildlife. And we went to visit her in her garden in Brighton as she prepared for winter.
When I was growing up, my mum always grew a Calicarpa shrub in the garden, covered in its bright purple berries. She said you should always plant it within view of the kitchen window because its berries are so cheering in the depths of winter. 25 years on, I realised she was right. And there's lots of other things we can do to cheer us and the wildlife when the days are short. It involves seeds, berries, nest boxes and flowers to keep your wildlife fed and watered till spring rolls in. And as native shrubs and trees provide shelter and food, they're an easy place to start. Hawthorn berries are great food for all sorts of creatures, but they're also full of antioxidants, which help migrating birds deal with the physical stresses of their travels. Alongside migrant birds, like blackcaps who fly in from Europe and love Calicarpas, even native birds like robins and blackbirds can head further afield, so they'll all appreciate it. But not all berries are created equal. Ivy is usually eaten late in the winter. It's been discovered that ivy berries, gram for gram, have more calories than a chocolate bar. So it might be that they're saving the best till last, or that they're not very tasty. Either way, they're still a fantastic resource for birds at the end of winter. The berries go black as they ripen, and dark berries have the most nutrients. So rosehips, guelder rose, and of course holly will bring in berry fans. Silver birch provides lots of seeds over winter, But I've also left a band of meadow around the pond, so seed heads from clover and knapweed are here too. But they don't have to be wild. And garden plants like verbena, sunflower and lavender all do the same job. And you don't need to give over your whole garden to seed. Just leaving little pockets here and there will make the world of difference to garden beds. Ideally, our gardens will provide all the food and shelter. But as that takes a while, I supplement mine with fat ball feeders, sunflower hearts and peanuts, which usually cover the bases. And as birds start sussing accommodation as soon as the days lengthen, now is the time for new bird boxes. This one's for robins and wrens. It's got this lovely open front here, but they also like to be quite hidden, so as the foliage grows, it'll be absolutely perfect for them. Tits prefer a clear flight line and open sight, like this one. And some will move in early. Last year, a great tit roosted all winter and then came back in spring with its mate, and they had a successful nest of 10 chicks. It was lovely. When it comes to flying insects over winter, there's obviously fewer around, but they'll definitely be hungry. This is my favourite winter clematis, called Freckles, and it'll be covered in bees. The most common winter flyer is the buff-tailed bumblebee, which is often seen out and about on sunny winter days. But more and more pollinators are coming out earlier in the season, and they all need food. So along with Freckles and other winter clematis, Mahonia is a big favourite, as are winter honeysuckle and Daphne. Then, by February, pots can really come into their own. Most daffs aren't that good for bees, but I have noticed that this one variety, Minnow, is really loved by the hairy-footed flower bee. They really do have hairy legs and a long black proboscis, and are very keen on lungwort and primrose too. Then, near the top of my pot are crocus, because in February, queen bumblebees are out looking for homes as well as food. And crocus, with their bowl-shaped flowers, can help out. They also give them somewhere to sleep, and you can often find them tucked up in a half-closed crocus flower early on a spring morning. These violas will provide colour through the autumn, and I'll whip them out before the crocus emerge. And because late winter storms can be bullish, I've discovered a useful trick. By bringing the pot under an overhang or a porch, you can protect it from the elements, keeping the flowers and the bees happier right up until the rest of the flowers start to open in spring.
I do admire the way that Kate manages to have so many different habitats in what is an ordinary sized garden. It just shows you that you don't need a huge space to make a really big contribution to encouraging wildlife, and we need it in our gardens. Now, here in the Paradise Garden, I was greatly influenced by travels I did a few years ago around the Islamic world, looking at Islamic gardens. And in all of them, I found elements that I really wanted to bring back to Longmeadow. And that inspiration from travel is something that Joe found when he went to visit a garden in North London.
Designing a garden from scratch can be quite a challenge. I mean, where do you start? Do you have a go at it yourself and look at books and magazines and television programs for inspiration? Perhaps employ a designer. It can all be a little overwhelming. But sometimes inspiration just comes out of the blue when you least expect it and from the most unlikely of places. Which is exactly what happened to Martha Krempel when she was 5,000 miles from her North London home visiting the Grand Canyon. Martha, it's a gorgeous garden, I have to say. I love the idea that you took your inspiration from 5,000 miles away and brought it back here to London. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I was on holiday with my family and we were driving around the Colorado River, and there was a particular stretch called Horseshoe Bend. And I was kind of transfixed with the way it kind of linked round and came back on itself. And because this garden, you had entry from 4 sides. So you've got the roadside, the kitchen, this garden room and the studio. It struck me that using a river was a really good way of kind of joining everything together so that you could come full circle.
So how do you replicate, or well, take inspiration from, the vast Grand Canyon and bring it here to a garden that's about 9 by 6 metres?
So we formed a pathway, which is this poured concrete path, and that snakes round very much like a river.
Yeah.
The intention was to link the access points to the gardens. And then I took really the colours from the desert were the sort of coral in the rock and then a kind of pale green colour in the rock. And when we poured the concrete, it's got a bit of pigment in it, a kind of very, very pale green, which you can see in the rain, actually. And so those were really the elements that I took with me from the desert.
I really like the way you've broken up the courtyard garden here with a central bed with this beautiful rose that I can smell from here. And I can see there's lots more to come as well.
We've got 2 beautiful roses. We've got Rosa Lady Emma Hamilton and Rosa Summer Song. And the idea of the island bed is that it does it blocks your view of the fire, but you can just see through. And so it's a sort of diaphanous barrier, but not a total barrier. And then later on, we've got Molinia Transparent, which comes up, and the flower heads are about 2 metres tall. So the use of that colour coral kind of links in with the brickwork and links in with the painted desert in Arizona, and then links back into the Melianthus major there, which links in with the concrete path in terms of the colour palette. And then I brought in the geranium because it's an all-round winner, and it's evergreen in this climate in London.
I love the way Martha has brought the planting right up to the window here. And often when people, have the back of the house knocked off and connect the kitchen to the garden, they'll have these big windows. But they will pave right up to the doors here or put a deck in or whatever without thinking about bringing that planting in. And what that does is sort of have the room in there and the gardens over there. But actually, if you leave a planting pocket here, you can create foreground, you feel connected to the garden, and you can get volume in too. And I know people are a little bit scared of putting trees in small spaces, but just look what this river birch does here. It's absolutely stunning. It adds plenty of height. It softens this corner beautifully. But also the character of its multi-stemmed form really sort of brings a wildness into this garden too. And the trunk is absolutely stunning. Now, that papery bark, there's tones of copper, of white, of pinks, and when it drops its leaves in the autumn and in winter everything is revealed, it'll only add more value to this garden. And when you come inside, you can see what it's doing. It's a brilliant verdant view, but also acting as a foreground to the rest of the garden too. I absolutely love it. And now there's a sense of humour here in this garden as well, because outside the birch, that is seriously hardy. That can cope with any conditions. Whereas this wonderful specimen, this is a succulent, this is Euphorbia ingens, and it's from South Africa. But it just contrasts nicely, and it's sort of blurring the interior and the exterior and playing with those 2 spaces. But again, Martha's planned this really far ahead because she's sunken the planter down into the floor in the kitchen area here, and it becomes actually part of the landscape and links into the garden really well. And it sets the tone for all these fabulous indoor plants. None of these would grow outside. But what I like is the way she's really balanced the garden and this garden room. Because often, you know, you grow a load of plants next to the window here. Yeah, they're enjoying the light. But here, this is the old garden wall on this side. She's actually taken the planting right across, so it balances the garden and the interior space. And here we've got a great selection of indoor plants, some up on the table, like these succulents, that lovely aloe. And then we've got this as well, this strelitzia with this great big architectural glossy leaves, really playing with different textures and different forms. But it brings you back to the main garden. And yeah, I know it's raining, but I'm still drawn out into this space and back towards this fantastic river birch where I started. And it does feel as if the garden and the interior are all part of a journey. And I know that Martha took her inspiration from Arizona, but the plants, well, they take you on a journey all over the world.
The thing that you can't actually see from the garden, of course, is we've got a little bit of a green roof up here.
Oh, I can see a little glimpse of it. That's about it.
It's kind of designed to be seen from above. It's a matrix of beautiful grasses, and then there's a kind of snake formation pattern of planting in there, starting with bulbs and then progressing to other plants, so it's seasonal.
It sounds gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it. No, I think the garden is beautiful, you know, the way it's laid out, the inspiration behind it, you know, and the plant selection is great.
Thank you.
Where are you going on holiday next, may I ask?
Cornwall.
Cornwall?
Yeah.
OK. So tree ferns, maybe?
Tree ferns, yeah. Bluebell wood.
I see, you're off again.
I'm throwing these bulbs on the ground, not to throw them away, but because if you want bulbs to look natural in grass, by far the best way of doing that is just chuck them on the ground and plant them where they land. And this is an allium called Ambassador, and it's got a long stem topped by a wonderful rich purple head. And what we've discovered here in the meadow that we're making in the orchard is that the introduction of what one might think of as border flowers actually makes the wildflower meadow look a lot better. So I'm throwing these on the ground and we'll plant them up, and next spring I expect that intensity of colour to shine out in amongst all the other wildflowers that I'm growing from seed. Well, I better get these in the ground. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this special celebratory programme. We've got two more to come, one which will be hosted by Adam and another when I will be back here at Longmeadow with you. So until then, bye-bye.